to have a lot of reference and things.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Hey, how's it going, guys? Good to go. Are you guys able to hear me in chat? If you guys could let me know, I just want to make sure that
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good to go. Are you guys able to hear me in chat? If you guys could let me know, I just want to make sure that
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Okay. Okay, cool. So, yeah, if you guys have any issues with the audio or anything, throw it in chat and let me know. I don't remember if I had this new mic set up the last time I streamed, which if not, that's fine. We should hopefully be good. But how's everyone doing? Hopefully the voice not good. Okay. Um can you let me know, businessman, what kind of issues you're having? Cuz on my side it's showing good audio. Um James said he can hear me. It's okay now. Okay, cool. Sweet. Okay, so welcome everyone. Hopefully everyone's having a good Sunday morning. For those of you who don't know, my name's Jared Chavez. I am a character artist in the game industry. I like to stream, through the ZBrush stream and whatnot. For those of you who are new, we had started this sculpt a couple months ago. I haven't been streaming quite as much lately as I would like to. Life's just been busy. Things have been going on and stuff, busy with work and whatnot. But this is where we're at with this guy. So this is where we started at, and this was just a couple of the progress sculpts. So the last couple of sculpts, and now we're just going to keep refining. Hopefully we can get it to a little bit more of a refined spot this stream. Still a ways to go. I want to take this pretty far if I can, but yeah, that's kind of hopefully what we're gonna do today. Um, so for those of you who are new, who've never been in one of my streams before, like I said, I'm a character in the games industry, or character artist in the games industry. I've worked for a couple of studios at this point in my career, and during these streams, I like to take questions, anything related to games, game art, anything like that. I'm more than happy to answer questions on that stuff. Uh, you know, with the knowledge that I do have. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. Whatever you guys want to talk about is always good to talk about. Um, yeah, and it just makes the stream go smoother. So it's always good to have questions. So if there's anything you're curious about, even if you guys want to talk about other things, movies, games, whatever you guys want to talk about, is always fine with me. But I like to be pretty relaxed in these streams. If there's things that you guys want to see, let me know. Can talk about that stuff too as well. But yeah, so this guy has gone pretty quickly so far. I mean, there's still a long ways to go, but I liked the overall direction that I was getting the last stream. I did plan on like working a little bit off stream on him, but that never ended up happening just because I have a couple of projects that I'm bouncing between right now, and this one is kind of like the lowest priority just because I have some other stuff with the other ones that I have to kind of get done. But this guy's been fun. Let's see. So this whole area really needs a lot of refinement. So we have a pretty good breakup of our kind of primary forms and some of our secondary forms and stuff. I did do a Z remesh. I dynameshed because I had these like tubes that I jammed in here in our last stream, which I need to kind of fix that whole area. It's a little weird. That I jammed in. So I went ahead and did this operation before the stream, but I dynameshed it and welded it together just so we have this to play with, and then I ran a Z remesh, which that's a pretty common way that I like to approach my workflow. I do a lot of sculpt, dynamesh it together, remesh that piece that was welded together, just so I can have like a topology on top of it. I tend not to sculpt to, um, I tend not to sculpt on like dynamesh for too long. Usually I will like towards the beginning of the project, like this, I think was all just, yeah, this was all dynamesh. So while I'm kind of smashing forms in and stuff, but once I get to a spot where I want to refine my forms a little bit more, I tend to, um, just want to work on actual topology. So that's kind of my workflow. So I went ahead and did that off stream just so that we weren't sitting here waiting for stuff to remesh. Are you using default lighting? Yeah, this is just default lighting. The material that I use is the basic material. So if you come in here, it's just this one, and I have it as my startup material. That's what I use with every project. I tend not to overthink the materials. There's some materials that I have and I like this one I have that I really like, and I use the other basic material too because it has some like nice highlights and stuff on it, but mostly just stick with the basic material. It's very similar to like a Lambert in something like Maya. Oops, what did I just do? Okay. Let's kind of build some of this area up a little bit. I kind of like this ridge that the concept has. Um, I also didn't mention this. The concept that this is based off of is a piece by John Tedrick. Um, so if you guys are interested, he has a lot of like really cool kind of like dragon dinosaur kind of work, and that is what this is based off of. Question. I only make 3D print art. What's the best way to start entering the world of games and animation? So if you're trying to get into animation or well, games or animation, I can speak more to games. I can speak a little bit to animation. I've never worked in animation, but if you're trying to do character art, the big thing that you'll want to know is, ZBrush. ZBrush is still kind of the main tool that is used in the industry for actually making characters. I don't know for sure how animation studios do it, so yeah, I don't know what they for sure use. I'm assuming ZBrush still, but someone would have to kind of confirm that just since I've never worked there. But you'll also need to learn some sort of 3D package, something like Maya, which that's what I use, just because that's pretty common practice for studios, especially animation studios. I think animation studios primarily only use Maya just because the tool sets that have been built in there. Um, but I use that for like my UVs and my retopology and stuff. That's where I do it. Just because it's easier to do it in there, and then I hand it off to like the rigging department and all that stuff. So during the process of the pipeline, it usually just stays in Maya after I'm done with it. So that's kind of the tool set that I really primarily use. So you'll need to learn how to do, your high poly sculpting. Um, you'll need to learn how to do low poly. If you're trying to do games, you'll need to learn how to do your UV unwrapping, which if you aren't familiar with that, what that's going to be doing is it's essentially going to be splaying out your topology on a flat surface so that you can start painting on it directly and providing color information for it. So you'll need to know how to do that, and then you'll need to know how to use a tool like Substance Painter for texturing, which that is again what I use. That Substance is pretty standard to games, VFX and film and stuff like that. You're going to be using something like Mari, just because they have bigger pieces. You look at like Godzilla has way more resolution and texture than anything in any game has. So that is kind of the tool set that they use. So those are the tools that I would recommend learning. If you want to get into games, though, really the big thing that you just have to know how to do is make good characters and appealing characters. So having an understanding of your kind of basic art fundamentals is really good and useful. Form, silhouette, primary forms, secondary forms, uh, color. Um, what else is there? Understanding how to texture, how to do all that stuff. That's really gonna be the best way to make good characters. It's not really as much about the technical side. Like you should know all the technical stuff, but um, that kind of comes secondary. So okay, let's see. Hello from Belgium. Hey, how's it going, Libra? Hi, Jared. Nice to see your live stream at last. Could you explain how you work the skin folds to give that feeling of interconnected? Yeah. So for this one in particular, what I did was you can see here, I actually just used the insert tubes brush, or the curve tubes brush, and I just drew along the surface, and then I just kind of used the curve and pushed and pulled until that was integrated into the form. So that was used to kind of create a little bit more overlap and in some of the stuff that I felt like I wasn't getting too much with the with my sculpting. So kind of just to reinforce some of that. So that's one way that I would do it. You could also just kind of go the other way and just sculpt it. But by actually like laying a form in, I feel like it's usually a little bit more helpful. So you can see like I have kind of like this natural sort of feeling of more droopy skin. So I would definitely try that. It's always really good, a really useful way. It's very similar to like the approach of using clay, but like just layering things on and then you blend it in. So yeah, definitely a useful approach. Let's tackle this area a little bit. Uh, Clay Spins, is that a new brush? No, Clay Spins is not a new brush. Clay Spins has been around probably, and I'm guessing, forever. It's just not like one of the brushes that's really in this tray. You can find it in the light box inside of brushes, and it is in the clay brushes. So it is right there. Yeah. So I use that. And the reason that I use that, I'll just show it real quick. If I do that, you can see that it's spinning the alpha. And if we look at it from the side, we have kind of a natural sort of fall off that's a little bit softer. So I like that for like volume creation. Whereas if I do clay tubes, it's much more of like a straight line and then a 90-degree fall off. So I just prefer it because I feel like it creates a little bit nicer form fall off than some of the other brushes. So I use it for other purposes as well. I usually use it to kind of get big forms in. So I definitely would recommend it if you are interested. It's a great brush. But I will say that I do know a lot of people that um, don't like clay tubes. I love it though. I think it's a really good brush. I use it a lot for detailing and things like that. Okay, so I kind of like this ridge that I have going here. Let's try and bring this up a little bit more. Yeah, I kind of like this like planar slope that I created, so we're going to try and reinforce that just a little bit. Okay. Where was I? Is that the default camera? Yep. I pretty much do everything default in ZBrush. I don't really tend to do too much special, I don't think, at least. And then the other question, what version of ZBrush are you using? I'm using 2024. I upgraded recently. There was a reason why I upgraded. I don't even remember what it was. I think it was maybe to like try out the new noisemakers that were released with the latest update. But usually, honestly, I tend not to stay too up to date on softwares. I kind of just update them when I remember to. And this one, I was like, oh, well, I feel like I might be able to use some of those surface noises. So I upgraded just to try those out, which I ultimately don't even know if I ended up using. But it was still seemed like a good opportunity to try. Okay, so let's get we want to get a little bit more forwardness from this form and recess this form back a little bit more. It's a little bit chunkier in this area. And then like that. Good morning, Jared. How are things going? Things are good. Just trying to get a little bit of work done on this Sunday morning. Excuse me. So for, I'll shout this out real quick too. For those of you guys who don't know, I do also have another YouTube channel, my own personal channel. If you guys are interested in any other stuff, definitely check that out. I do like a lot of texturing work, and I also do my own kind of other characters over there that I show some more process for. So go check that out if you're interested in some of that stuff. But yeah, check that out if you guys are interested. That stuff, I do more stuff over there than just ZBrush. So um yeah, but to the idea of streaming, I do stream over there too as well. I will say I haven't been the best about it. I haven't really been streaming too much lately, but I like to do streams of this, streams of Substance, streams of working in Engine if I can, things like that. So if that stuff interests you, make sure to check it out. I also do portfolio reviews over there. That's usually a big draw for people. I try to do those once a month, which I say that, but I didn't do one in February. Hopefully I can do one here in March this month. But yeah. Hey Jared, thank you for stream. Can you explain why do we need to bake maps in applications like Substance Painter and Marmoset? Yeah, definitely. Okay, so in games and film and any of that stuff, we are limited by a finite amount of resource. So ultimately, what that means is if I was to take this model that has, 2 million polygons when it is fully subdivided, it's not easy to manipulate that down the pipeline. So because of that, we have to create a low poly version. And when you create a low poly version, you lose all of your detail. You essentially go from something like this to something like this. And there's big shapes and big forms kind of still captured in this low poly, but it doesn't look anywhere near as good as this. So that's really the main reason why, is because we have to lower the resolution of the character in order to start creating a mesh that's usable downstream. So that's really the biggest thing. So hopefully that answers the question. Hopefully I did a good job of explaining that. Let's do this. Move this section out a little bit. We want some more of this kind of like wide jaw shape. This masseter on this guy feels huge. Yeah. Which that's something I will mention, you know, when you're working on creatures and stuff like this, and I even am victim of this, but I'll just like kind of sculpt on this side, you know, make things look good, but sometimes I kind of forget to look at the silhouette from the front, make sure that it looks interesting and good. Definitely check that, because then if not, you're going to end up with like oops, that's the wrong thing. You're going to end up with like a head that like is crushed and looks like this and doesn't look right. So that's the curse of working in 3D, I guess. You know, you got to work in all 3 dimensions. Okay, let's go back up to here. So this area is a little bit weird in the concept, and it's kind of hard to tell if it's just I think it's just patterning on the head. But we're just gonna go with it. We're just gonna see what happens, I guess, because who knows? And if we don't like it, we'll fix it. Okay. So, actually, you know what? Let's see. Yeah, there's some like weird lines on here that I'm not a huge fan of on the concept that kind of like feel like are a little bit odd, but they're odd because in 2D you can make everything work, which is something that I am jealous of in 3D. I wish that I could like fake some of the stuff the way that you can in 2D drawings. That'd be really cool. But unfortunately, we are limited because we have 3 dimensions. So next question. I tried to learn sculpting animal heads. Is this method any good, and do you have a better way to learn it? Yeah, I definitely would recommend. So the first streams that I did is probably a better approach to sculpting. I have gotten to the point where like I can kind of do that without doing it a little bit, but essentially what that method is breaking things down to very, very primary forms. So like with this piece, I just started with a sphere and started pushing, pulling, sculpting, you know, making big shapes. With the other piece, which I'll show it real quick, it was just a dog head sculpt. So I would check that out if you're interested. Let's see, maybe this one. Yeah, so you can see here, I'm just using very basic primary shapes, like small, simple shapes to kind of capture the forms and refine some of the shapes that I'm seeing. And this is a really easy way to start because you get a lot of that like mileage really quickly for shapes and different things like that. So then from there, I think I just started to focus on the head. So you can see just from, and this was from one stream to the next stream. So that's what I would recommend. I also would recommend obviously having like an anatomy book with you, because that is going to be incredibly useful. Study the anatomy, study the skull, you know, understand what's actually happening. And once you understand like the structure of the skull and things like that a little bit better, or have a general idea of it, you can start to layer the muscles on. And once you understand animal anatomy, you can start to do creature anatomy. You definitely want to make sure to have animal anatomy to do creatures, because it's although it's like made up, there is a lot of this that I try to still kind of ground in reality, you know. And most anatomy for animals, a lot of things are trans relatable, if that's a word, I guess, between different animals. So yeah, hopefully that helps. But that's kind of how I learned to do them, and you just keep doing them. You just keep making heads, different, doing it over and over again, and with each one you kind of learn a little bit more. So let's actually make this area a little bit more. what pipeline should actually to be followed for portfolio? The pipeline of whatever industry you're trying to get in. If you're trying to make games, then you should be making game characters. So the pipeline for game characters is just going to be sculpting your high poly in ZBrush. I mean, you can use other software, but I will say that when it comes to games and making game characters, the 99, actually no, everyone that I have ever met always sculpts their characters in ZBrush, and because of that, it's one of those like files that other people may potentially have to open at a later time, like say you're making cosmetic changes or skins or things like that. Everyone has to use ZBrush because the fact that, like, say I make a character and someone's going to make a skin or something, then if I end up like sculpting in something like Blender or something like that, then they're going to be like, I'm not going to open this. I don't know the first thing about that software. Like, you need to bring it over into ZBrush. So ZBrush is kind of like a common through line between all character artists. So using something like ZBrush, then doing your low poly and whatever software you want, to your low poly doesn't really matter where you do it at. It can be something like Topo Gun, it could be something like Maya, Blender, whatever you want, 3ds Max, any of those. And then you just have to do your UVs, which again, you can do that anywhere and everywhere. And then I bake my textures inside of Marmoset. That's where I tend to bake them, just because I like the tool set of Marmoset. Depending on the project, sometimes the project may require something like Substance Painter, just depending on what I need out of it. But sometimes I'll use Substance Painter, and then I texture everything in Substance Painter for my characters, so you'll have to do that. So your portfolio should reflect the fact that you can do all of those steps and that you can make a character. That's really the primary pipeline that you should be following. There are small intricacies in those pipelines that kind of vary from artist to artists. Like myself, I do things in Marmoset for baking. That's kind of like a small thing that just makes me a little bit faster, so I use that. But I know a lot of people that use Substance Painter instead. So that part, some of those small like nuanced parts, those can be a little bit more up to your own discretion and what works for you. But that's kind of the overall general gist of it, though. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Okay. This form is a little bit weird. Yeah, I don't really like what this nose looks like. It's kind of janky looking, but oh, my alarm is going off. I want to shift from characters to creatures. Well, I can say that's what I did. Or well, I actually wouldn't say that like in terms of like everyday work, like I still do characters, I do creatures, I do both. But I did start out learning characters first. And for me, it wasn't necessarily the fact that I didn't want to do creatures. It was more so the fact that like I kind of was afraid to do creatures. Mostly because I think with like creatures you kind of have to like flex your imagination a lot more than you do with people, with humans. With humans it's kind of like a human's a human. You can always kind of make something that looks like a human. um so it wasn't until I worked on Back for Blood and they were like, hey, you're gonna make some creature characters there, where I was like, I kind of got thrown into the deep end on doing those. So um yeah, that was kind of the ride that I took. But definitely do it. Creatures are a lot of fun. I personally, I like doing creatures more than characters, and that's like reflected in my personal work. They all of my stuff that I do in personal work now is primarily creature sculpting. So, and that's just because they're just too fun. It's much more fun to like make stuff up but it definitely does take practice. At least it did for me. It took me a lot of practice to kind of feel comfortable with doing creatures, and you know, I was fortunate where that practice just happened to be that I was doing it at work. So I kind of had to learn on the job, but you know, I enjoyed it. I don't like that eye. I don't like this shape that this has. I actually don't even like this like little cavernous eye orbital socket area at all. So let's try and reshape this a little bit. I kind of even don't know if I really even like this form there. It's not necessarily even like in the concept, but I feel like structurally wise, it's something that you expect. And I also need to like fix this area. These teeth are kind of like faltering back in on themselves and it looks kind of weird. So let's see if we can maybe solve this area a little bit more. Okay. Let's see. Wow, that really messed me up. Strong jawline muscles. Yeah, definitely got to get some jaw. Okay, we're not gonna say that anymore. Jeez. Uh, yeah, guys, I promise I'm not having an aneurysm. But definitely want some strong muscles in the jaw for this, especially for something like a turtle, you know. That's their primary functionality is kind of that like chopping and crunching. So definitely want to reinforce that, especially since it's like this big old dragon kind of looking thing, you know, want to maybe make that a little bit more foreboding sort of feature to it. Let's chisel this down. Still has that like socket to feel like there is an eyeball that it can hold. Let's get this shape down here a little bit more. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. I could probably make it a little bit more droopier, you know, make this guy kind of older, saggier looking. Turtle's got a lot of that like excess skin. That was part of the reason why I picked this character is, you know, the kind of like looser skin and turtles, they're interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with turtles. Oops. Just spinning around the model crazy. Okay, so let's see what we've done even just in this short time. So small changes, but we're definitely starting to refine some of these shapes more, which is good. Let's jump over here and work on this area a little bit. So we're gonna we had the question a little bit earlier about like some of these folds and things like that. So this is an area where like I'm just going to kind of sculpt them in. I don't need them to, I wanted these ones to be a little bit more exaggerated, and like this one looks pretty okay. It still needs some refining. I do think I need to probably do like this just to make the angles a little bit nicer, but I think that works okay. So yeah, we'll just kind of sculpt on these ones. We won't do too much. I'm gonna probably make this one the most forward kind of puffing one, and then this one will be a little bit more recessed, kind of where it's at. Sorry guys, I know I'm kind of just like talking through this more than checking chat today, which is surprising. I feel like I'm normally more focused on chat than I am actually sculpting. But where were we at? I always face a problem with Dynamesh when it comes to details. If I reduce the Dynamesh, most of the details go away. Yeah, don't use Dynamesh for detailing. I wouldn't do that. And the reason for that is exactly what you said, is because you're going to lose information. So, that took me a long time to kind of figure out, because I'm like, well, what's a better workflow for it? And my workflow for it is, and I can just show here, this was done with Dynamesh. So I have kind of like my big main masses. This was still Dynamesh, where I was kind of starting to refine some of those masses a little bit more and just kind of push it further. And then once I got to this point, I started using, well, actually, this one's Dynamesh together, but this is because I needed this for to do this. But now you can see I have a low poly, and from this point, I would take this Z remeshed low poly essentially, and I would use this to start putting my detail on. I definitely wouldn't try detailing on a Dynameshed model. You're just going to be fighting with it the whole time. You could, like, if you do, you can Dynamesh up to a certain point and be like, okay, well, I'm cool with this, and you can subdivide it. But the problem with that is, in Dynamesh, you will have lots of little areas like this where there's like triangles, there's, a lot of like irregular faces, and because of that, you'll end up with like wonky looking artifacts going on your model. So I don't really do that. Uh, let's bump this up a little bit more. And also, one of the nice things about having actual topology is, so when you're working at like this high of a level, you have no control. So if I come here and like smooth some of this stuff, you can see that like a lot of this form is still really, really blobby looking. So like even right here, I start to lose a lot of that like control over the form. But if I come down here, it's a lot easier to like smooth this information out and get a more resolved shape. So that's usually something that I tend to see in kind of like younger artists, even some older artists, that they work too high on putting kind of form on. And when you work too high, you end up with like this really kind of like irregular surface. And that's extremely noticeable, and that's not a good thing. We want we don't want a surface that looks like this. We want a surface that looks more like this, where it feels refined and polished and um, more clean. Like there's still a lot of this area of this model that feels pretty wobbly for my liking, but over time we'll get there. And if you ever want to like look at someone who has incredible control over their forms, GeoNacpil is a really good resource to watch. I love his work. He does some of the coolest sculpts of form work just ever, and his stuff is really great to watch. So I definitely recommend it. Okay. Um, I like to do zombies, skull zombies, that kind of stuff. Um, these are comes under creatures or character. Um, I mean, I would consider that more like character than I would creature. Just because the fact, like, if it retains a human facial structure, I would probably I would say it kind of falls a little bit more into character, where I think creature tends to fall into like anything outside of that. It could vary. Like I did a xenomorph a couple, like last year. I would consider that creature as opposed to human. Like it has a lot of human elements. It has a lot of like human anatomy and qualities that you would find on like a sculpture of a human, but I wouldn't consider it like a character. I would consider it more creature. I mean, not all characters are creatures, but all creatures are characters, I guess is a good way to look at it, if that makes sense. So hopefully that helps. Um, why are you using clay forms brush? I use clay forms as kind of like a toned down brush to clean up forms. With clay spins, it's it's not as easy to kind of like polish it out. See, like just by softening that out, it doesn't soften out quite as well. So I use that to capture big forms, and then I use the clay forms brush that I made to like get smaller strokes so that I can start to refine that. So it's just like a lower intensity brush that I use to kind of like polish my forms a little bit more. Usually when I'm working from I work from big to small, so my primary forms, secondary forms, tertiary forms, and I kind of also do that same sort of like logic with my brushes too, in terms of like intensity. As I'm getting smaller, the brush is getting less intense and more just refined. So yeah. All right, let's turn this down a little bit. I don't Yeah, I don't like this area. This area looks really bizarre. So what we're gonna do is kind of just knock some of this out on the top part. Smooth some of that out. Let's see, what did it look like before? Mm, yeah, this like bulge right there, that's a little bit weird. I want to kind of move that forward. I think I want to move all of this area forward a little bit. I think with those shapes being pushed back, it made it feel like he's a little bit more like nice than he should be looking. I want him to look a little bit more intimidating and not like a nice looking animal. So using some of those shapes to kind of inform that information. And then like this line right here, I think that that's also not helping it. So I'm going to kind of taper this in a little bit more to hopefully reinforce that a little bit. Okay, well that's happening. Okay, it's gone. If you were going to carve a mouth open, which method would you prefer? So if I was gonna carve a mouth open, I would do that ahead of time. So like I would probably have done it back at this point where when I'm in Dynamesh, just because it's easier to manipulate and kind of like create that form initially. So I would follow the same workflow. I would sculpt all of that information in Dynamesh. So I would sculpt with the mouth open, get to a certain point like this, and then I would get topology in there. Um, which you might be asking, like, oh, well, would you do like a real topology since the mouth is open? Maybe. It depends. It depends if I'm able to get enough quality out of the resolution that I need from ZRemesher. If not, then possibly. But with that, you do run the error of like you have to be solid and locked in with your forms, because you can't really go back and change it. I mean, there's solutions and ways to kind of modify it, but you can't make like super drastic changes. So yeah, I mean, and I guess what I mean in that sense is like, say you like modeled in these like little teeth, you probably couldn't like take these teeth and like shift all of them up over here and like leave this area clean, because a lot of that stuff would probably be modeled into your model, your low poly. So hopefully that makes sense. um I'm gonna take a quick drink real quick and just kind of look at some of these. Let's see. Okay. Is the clay forms brush only available on the newer versions of ZBrush? I don't see it in 2022. No, it's a brush that I made. It's not in ZBrush. It's just a modified brush that I made. First time catching your stream live. Love your content. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for justifying the question. It helped me understand much better about character creation pipeline. Only, or one more question. How important really retopology is for creating UVs besides rigging? It's, I mean, they're kind of one and the same is how I would describe them. So, I mean, you should make good topology for rigging, but with that just comes, let me see. Okay, one question: how important really is retopology is for creating UVs? Um, I wouldn't say it's the most important, but it is something that you should consider. And the reason for that is like we'll look at like a shirt, for example. We have, sorry, I have to like get my arm in frame, but you have a seam here on the shoulder, right? Um, you want to you would also put a loop there for animation purposes so that the arm and shoulder deforms properly, but you also could put the a loop in that specific seam of where the shirt separates so that you can have a clean hidden UV seam. So you just kind of have to think about those things when you're doing UVs. Hopefully that helps. um so yeah, I mean, you don't have to like necessarily like plan your UVs out entirely. I don't plan them out. I put seams in natural areas where it's kind of like a nice break. If you have things like fabric, that's a good place to put it, is where there's natural seams in the model, so that you can kind of hide any tiling or repetition, uh anything like that. So um have you changed any pressure settings on your Wacom, or is it factory setting? I have the pressure setting to really sensitive, I think is what I have it on. Just because like I'm kind of like a brute force, like, a brute when it comes to sculpting, and I have a tendency of like over pushing pressure on my hands. So it was just in an aim to like reduce how much stress I put on my hands, like for pressure wise. My hands can sometimes hurt, especially if I'm doing like small meticulous things for too long. And one of them is like really having to push hard to get a lot of pressure sensitivity out of my tablet. So I changed those settings all the way down, just so that they're not as strenuous on my hands, is really the big reason why. So okay, so let's see. I feel like I don't know how I'm going to like integrate these turtle hump things. I mean, they look like crap right now, but right now they're just kind of like circular little tubes that enclose it, and I don't think I want that. So I don't know, guys. I don't know what I'm going to do for that yet. We'll come back to that later. I don't want to really worry about that right now. How do you spell his name? I'm assuming that you're talking about Geo. It's just Gio and then Nakpil, Nakpil. Super super useful stuff. He doesn't do like a lot of stuff on YouTube, but you can find a couple of videos that he's made talking about things, and you can also find a lot of stuff on his Instagram. I would check that out. He's great to watch. I think watching him work is just always super exciting, and seeing uh, how he approaches things, and I try to approach things in a similar manner. So let's come back to here, and we're gonna probably working on too small of forms in this area, but I just don't like the way that this ear canal is like looking. It just looks kind of out of place, so trying to make it feel a little bit nicer. How's everyone's weekend been? Hopefully everyone's doing okay. Anyone go see Dune this weekend? I went and saw it. Me and my wife went and saw it on Friday, and we really enjoyed it. So I definitely would recommend it if people haven't seen it yet. It was a lot of fun. Very, very pretty movie to look at. If even if you don't like it, I would say it's worth watching just for like the art that's in it, you know, the visual art, the sound, the CG, the art direction, all that stuff. Super, super pretty movie. Well, screw my question. What was your question? I don't see your question. Hey, enjoy the stream. Does one do retopology? Oh, okay. I guess I missed that question. Sorry, I apologize. A lot of words in the comment sections that I don't necessarily see sometimes, so I apologize. Hey, enjoyed the stream. Does one do retopology, then bake the high poly onto the low poly after you do the UV? Yes. Yep. You're just using your low poly as a way to catch your details. So hopefully that answers your question. Well, your character art test from ArtStation made things a lot clearer about character creation, and also watched the character art test breakdown with Jay Hill. You and Jay Hill are my inspiration. Well, I appreciate that. That's kind words. Thank you for supporting the videos. I always appreciate it. You would start out by creating your high res, retopologize it to a game res in Maya, Topogun, or Blender, UV, bake, and texture. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, that's the workflow. Wish I had a better handle on the UI. It's very confusing. Yeah, the UI for ZBrush, it is confusing. But I will say that I actually don't do a lot of stuff. I all of this may seem really confusing, but this is all just buttons that I use. You know, my materials, my brushes, and really I use like 3 or 4 things here. A lot of this stuff I added at some point. I need to like reorganize this UI because it's a little bit messy. But it's not too bad. Once you get the hang of it, it comes pretty natural. But I will say that's usually everyone's kind of like first criticism with ZBrush is like, what the heck's going on? I think a lot of that does come from the fact that most people start out with like a different 3D package, so it seems a little bit weird, like load tool, what are tools? Why not just go to file, open, save as, like, but then it saves things as projects, and like you know, that stuff can be a little bit confusing if you're first, or if you are familiar with another project or another software, which like for me, I originally started learning in Blender, and then I moved to Maya, which those are pretty, you know, comparable softwares. Like there wasn't too much that changed between the two of them, so I didn't really have to like transition much. But once I started learning ZBrush, I had to like watch tons and tons and tons of tutorials just to like get an understanding of what I was trying to do. So it does take time, but I definitely I wouldn't use any other software at this point. And, you know, I know that probably sounds rich considering the fact that like I'm streaming on the ZBrush channel, but it's true. I think that ZBrush is the best tool that I have access to. It's my favorite tool. I love sculpting in it. I have a lot of fun in it. So once you can get past the UI, I definitely think it's worth it. It's a lot of fun. But it is not easy, you know. I definitely empathize with that statement. But I promise it's worth it once you get past it. Okay, let's see. We'll kind of work on these folds a little bit. Dang, we've already been going for an hour. It doesn't even feel like it's been that long. Which that's a good thing. When you guys ask questions, makes things go by real quick. Hopefully you guys have gotten something useful out of the stream so far. Maybe not. Who knows? But if anything, I appreciate you guys coming and hanging out. Let's see, can we make something kind of shift off like that? Yeah, that doesn't look bad. Uh, can you suggest best display tablet under budget? So I do not really have the most experience with tablets. I started out using like a Wacom tablet, like the small bamboo tablets that they used to have. I don't even know if they make those anymore, but those were pretty affordable. I think that they were like maybe it was maybe like $100 or something like that. So if they do have kind of an option like that, I would say that those are good. I did get an Intuos uh when I was in college, and that was also a good tablet. I still have that and I do still use it every once in a while, especially like um when I'm like going out of town or something like that, I'll use it. So I would recommend those. They are a little bit weird if you aren't used to the idea of like having your hand disconnected from the screen. It can take a little bit of getting used to, but they're good devices. And then I have used Cintiqs since I was in college. I bought my first Cintiq when I was in college because I had planned on, this being a career, so I thought it was a good investment. And I used my first Cintiq up until like last year. I had a Cintiq 24 HD, and it got great use out of it. I loved it. It was a great purchase for me, which is nice because you get to work like directly on the screen. It's a big screen, so if that is appealing to you, but those are obviously going to be the most expensive one. And then I got another Cintiq last year, and this one has been good that I use during when I can use that one. But I do use my Intuos. I use a Cintiq. I did buy a Wacom Companion Pro a couple of years ago. That I will say I wasn't a big fan of, just because it was really heavy and didn't really last for too long. It kind of ended up becoming an expensive paperweight, which was unfortunate. So that kind of sucked, but yeah. And then also I also do have a Canvas Pro that I am going to be doing a review on here shortly. I need to film some stuff about the review for that. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check out my ArtStation, or not Arts. Well, yeah, ArtStation, as well as Instagram. It'll be on there, which I've heard great things about. I just haven't had the time to sit down and fully uh, write a review of that. So, but yeah, those I've also heard great things about. So check those out if you're interested. Um, let's see. Yes, Dune is masterpiece. Yeah, it was really great. Definitely going to give it a watch. Yep, super cool movie. Hans Zimmer. It's like a trucking movie. Yeah, Hans Zimmer. He's a great composer. A lot of really like interesting music in there. Oops, didn't mean to do that. But definitely worth a watch if you can get a chance to go. And I wanted to watch the original one in theaters, the first one, but I wasn't able to because I don't know if it was released in theaters since COVID was going on during that time. But I'm glad I got to watch it in theaters because it was a cool experience. Okay, I feel like this stuff is starting to get there. Let's kind of soften some of this area out. I need to clean this guy up because this is looking a little wobbly. But that looks better. Okay. Look at that. We're making progress. Things are getting a little bit more refined. We're getting in a good spot. So that's good. That is what we want. Anyone got the Copilot on W11? Annoying. I'm not sure what that is. I think all software have quirks. Yes, that is true. Hey, how's it going, Sheriff? love sculpting on it, but hate UV Master. I'll never use it. Yeah, I would not recommend. I mean, it depends. It depends what you're after. For me personally, when I'm at home doing personal projects, some projects I will use UV Master just because the fact that I want to not have to focus on UVs. And if it's like something like this head, I might do UV Master just because it's quick. But also like I could do a quick cleaner UV in Maya in like 10 minutes. So sometimes it makes more sense to do it that way. Sometimes it makes more sense to just do quick UVs. For production, I never use the UV Master just because I have to have like more accuracy. So yeah, I won't use them there, but if I just need something quick on personal project and I'm not too worried about what it's going to spit out, then I will do that. But I know people that in a lot of their personal work they just use UV Master, but I get a little bit more like I guess anal about using or having like clean UVs on projects. So okay, sorry, I'm just gonna look and see. This kind of feeling a little bit weird. Is that gonna... Sorry, I'm just talking to myself at this point. We'll see if this works. This may look weird because it's like jettisoning in. So yeah, we're just gonna keep this. All these wrinkles are all gonna be kind of flowing from this point, following that directionality. We'll also what is this music I'm listening to? Oh, that's what I thought. Don't want to listen to that. A lot of useful information. Thank you. Good. I'm glad to hear. Huon's very good. Yeah. Looking great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Are they gonna release the iPad version soon? No clue. Don't know. I just work on the streams. They just let me stream on their channel, and that is it. I don't know anything aside from that, so I apologize. But hopefully, I'm excited for it. I'm really excited to check it out. I do think that is one thing that I'm excited for is because I how I'd mentioned I had a Wacom companion tablet, and that was really the only reason I bought it was because the fact that I wanted to sculpt like on my couch. And the thing was just too heavy and too hot and too bulky to like kind of work on it anywhere that wasn't at a table. So I didn't end up getting as much use out of it as I'd hoped. And when they announced the ZBrush for iPad, that is kind of what I had hoped for. So, yeah. Does anyone know what happened to Brandon Isaiah? I am not sure what happened to him. I am not sure. I'm sure he's just probably busy with life and whatnot. They give us like free reign over when we schedule for these streams, so I'm sure it's just life. But also, I don't know that for sure, so take that with a grain of salt. Let's see. Topo Gun or Maya? I use Maya. I've never used Topo Gun before. I'm sure it's a good tool considering that's like its whole sole focus is topology. So I'm assuming it's probably pretty good. I just have never used it. Maybe one of these days I'll crack it open. It's just one of those things where it's like I tend to just kind of stick with what I have already, and that's really it. No reason. Uh, Okay, I have a question. High poly or medium poly due to it seems this is purely a visual choice for me. Um, in terms of like your final resolution or what? I guess I don't fully understand the question. How do you get on board to live stream on ZBrush Live? They just asked me. They messaged me and were like, "Hey, would you be interested in this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, sounds great." So that's how I got to be a part of it, which was cool. Um, I don't know what else kind of went into that, like how they decided me, but yeah, I think it was like, shoot, how long have I been streaming for him for? I've been streaming with him for like the last like 6 months or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. It was like last July, I think. Yeah. So, but it's always fun. When I've been streaming here, and by streaming here, I haven't really been streaming quite as much as I would like to, but I've probably streamed here on this channel more than I have on my own channel more in the past couple of months. This year has just been really busy. So streaming has been harder to find time for than it was, but I hope that I can do more streams in the future. For ZBrush, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to stream another time this month or not. I This month's pretty busy too, so we will see, but hopefully. Um, in terms of what would you consider medium forms? So let's see. Maybe I have an example of something I can show that's more medium forms. It's kind of hard, like the line of what is primary forms to what is like secondary forms to what is tertiary forms always kind of changes a little bit. But let's see if we can see if I have anything that I can kind of illustrate that with. I think we could probably show this real quick. This might be a better example to kind of illustrate it. We're pretty close to what I would consider medium forms. Like this is more medium forms. Okay, so we have this guy, and this is obviously like this is finalized. Like this is the full final high poly. But if we turn off like all of these layers, we can kind of step through it to see what is. So again, this is very similar to this in terms of like resolved. This I would consider like more secondary forms, but I don't have a picture. Let's see. I might have another version. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, so here was this one had a lot more like kind of forms to it, you know, some of these bigger forms which I would still consider like primary forms. This is resolving that. So there are some of these secondary forms. So like you can see this jaw, this is a primary form, and then there's secondary form, secondary form, secondary form, secondary form, secondary form, secondary form. So it's taking those big forms and making smaller forms in those forms. So on this one, you know, like primary form, secondary form, secondary form, secondary form, secondary form, secondary form, secondary form, and then there's tertiary forms. which is, let's look at this. So there's this, which is like more tertiary forms. It's taking those secondary forms and making them smaller to tertiary forms, and then just doing that throughout the whole model until I have essentially a completed character with tertiary forms, and then more tertiary forms, uh, and then just a couple of corrections and integrations, and then some extra layers on top of it to get the final look that I'm after. And so that's kind of the overall phase. This, I would say that there's kind of like a very interesting line between secondary forms, tertiary forms, and tertiary details. It depends on how granular you want to get, because you could look at things in terms of like block out, primary forms, secondary forms, tertiary forms, and tertiary details, which is, I think is a little bit easier to digest because the fact that it's like it's more steps to understand the bigger picture, whereas like there is that kind of confusion of, hold on one sec, sorry, my mom is calling me. Can't talk right now, Mom. I'm streaming. Um, but so that, like, because there can be a very big broad line between the two of them. So I think that is kind of how I clarify it a little bit more. Like, well, what is a blockout? A blockout is like a very just generic, simple shape of the character, which in this one I don't think I have. This I would consider kind of a blockout still, but I more so would say that this is like a block out than anything. So this is like a very quick block out with some establishment of primary forms. So yeah, that's kind of like my methodology in it, and it took me a really long time to kind of grasp that concept. So hopefully that like made it a little bit simpler than it was for me when I first started, because that took me way longer than I care to admit on how hard it was to kind of delineate between what those things are. And I think, excuse me, I think what's really hard to understand is your secondary forms to your tertiary forms can just feel like such a big jump in how the overall model is perceived. So I think that that's the hardest part to kind of like understand, is like, how do I get from that point to this point? And a lot of it is just, doing it. You just have to keep going from big to small and just keep going smaller and smaller until you get to a final piece. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that, wasn't just me rambling. It could have just been me rambling, but I thought that was a really, really useful and insightful question. I feel like I can snip that and post it on social media, because I hope that was a good answer. So maybe it's not. Maybe people watch and be like, what is he talking about? What is he rambling on? Because that is kind of what it feels like sometimes, that I just ramble. But yeah. Okay. I'm going to get another drink real quick. Let's see. What else do we have? How do we make Feather like you did in the Lone Wolf character? Oh, sorry, I missed a question before that. I'll get to that one in a second. So that I did using XGen, and then I just baked it down. Nothing too crazy. So actually, yeah, I think that's what I did. I may have hand painted it. I don't remember, but there's a lot of ways that you can go about it. But I think that's what I did, is I just like XGen modeled it. I used XGen and built the feather using that. So holy crap, Jared Chavez streaming on for Max on. Nice. Yes, I actually do stream here every once in a while, so keep an eye out for me if you want to come hang out. Also, I stream on my own channel. Shameless plug. Come hang out there too if you want. I asked because I see you have 8 something million polys, yet you're working at 512. Oh, okay. So that makes sense. So yes, I have this many million polygons, but I'm not going to work on this subdivision until I'm like detailing, because again, talking about like the idea of big, so say we have a resolution like this, you know, I can easily manipulate and move this around and do what I need to, but as I like get to this point, I have to like come in closer so that I can have that same level of control as what I just saw. And then if I go all the way up here, now I have to like be down at this size to have that same level of control. So that's why I work at the level that I'm working at. It usually just kind of depends, but yeah, I usually work at like a mid level range. Sometimes I fluctuate. It just kind of depends where I'm at in like my form structures, you know. So I think I need to kind of accentuate this ridge a little bit more, which for that I'm going to need to see a little bit higher res. Kind of like this. I guess I haven't really worried about like these little gaps because they kind of look a little bit odd. Because they're really like recessed back. So we'll maybe try and get some information in there. And I've tried that, but it never works well for me. Yeah, I mean that is the way that I would recommend working. Uh, how do you export sculpt into ZBrush for retopology? I don't use ZBrush to retopologize, but what I do to get it to something like Maya is I will get, you know, whatever resolution I want. There's a couple of things that you could do. If I wanted to, I could easily come to this subdivision level, which is only 120,000, and bring this to do retopology in. It still has all the same big forms that I need to capture in my low poly. So I could do that, or you could just come to Decimation Master and you could decimate it really low if you really wanted to, and then you could bring that over to your application to use as where you start snapping your points onto. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that makes sense, but yeah, that's what I do. Definitely don't bring over the highest subdivision level, because then you're just gonna be fighting with it the whole time. You prefer retopology in ZBrush or 3D software like Maya or Blender? I use Maya. I would not. I don't. I used to try to do topology in ZBrush, but then it just, there's quicker tools in Maya. So I've never been able to do proper retopology in ZBrush. Yeah, same thing. It's you can with the Z spheres. That was like a technique a long time ago, but I haven't done that in forever. Do you sell 3D models anywhere? I sell some tutorials and some of the models that I make and some substance materials and things like that on my ArtStation store. Um, so I have a kind of a range of things that I offer on there. They are, yeah, I have a couple of substance material packs that I've made. I have an eye tutorial that I've made on like the process of creating an eye from scratch, as well as a couple of different eye models that I sell on there. So those are on my ArtStation store. So if you just search Jared Chavez, you should be able to find me on there pretty quickly. So let's see. I don't know how I'm gonna like, what's a good way to kind of like separate these two areas, like if that should actually be like kind of a lip modeled in, or I guess, yeah, maybe it will be. Okay. um what material have you used in ZBrush for the eyes for the dinosaur? The eyes for the dinosaur, I don't think I used any material different. Let's see, did I? Let me open this up real quick. Let's see. Yeah, this is just the base material, the basic material. There's nothing different about this. Occasionally I'll use something crazy if I want to, but yeah, it's just the base material. Which now we'll sculpt on this one. This is a good material to use for sculpting. I like this material. Da, 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 da. That makes sense. Thank you very much for explaining. Cool. Glad to hear. How do you make feathers? Hopefully I answered that. I just use XGen. How many hours of practice would you recommend? That's a good question. So I will say that for me now, I work on characters art at least probably an hour a day, if not more. And that's just because like I wake up early, so I usually wake up at like anywhere from like 5:30, 5:45 to 6 to work on my own personal work before work. So I get up pretty early to do that. Um, some people aren't morning people. That's fine. I'm not saying you have to get up that early to work on personal work. I just find that works best for me, because it's a little bit harder for me to like find the desire to work on work after work, just because like I've kind of spent all day working on work, and it's a little bit taxing. So I tend to do that. But I would recommend start with like 30 minutes, and if you can do 30 minutes, I think 30 minutes every day by the end of the week, that's at least a couple of hours. So I would recommend that, if you feel like you can do 30 minutes, then start to kind of creep up if you feel like you have the time for that. I think really the biggest thing is just make the time. It doesn't matter necessarily how much time it is. It doesn't have to be 6 hours a day, 2 hours a day. It doesn't even have to be an hour a day, but if you're doing like 30 minutes a day, you will continue to like progress. So that's what I would recommend. At least do like 30 minutes a day. 30 minutes a day is really not too much to ask, and I understand people are busy and you have lives, and I have a life, but I manage it, like I'm able to work my full-time job. I'm able to spend time with my family. I'm able to take my dog for a walk. I'm able to go to the gym. I'm able to do all of those things. You just kind of have to prioritize it a little bit, I guess, make the time for it. Um, it's kind of like going to the gym. If you set up a schedule for it and you just follow through with it, it's it becomes a routine. And for me, I've been doing it for so long that it's just kind of a routine, and it feels weird when I don't do it. Um, so yeah, hopefully that helps. I mean, it doesn't have to be any extended period of time, but I think like a half an hour, and just kind of go from there. And maybe some days you do 2 hours. Maybe some days you on the weekend you're like, well, I don't have anything to do, and I just want to kind of like sculpt my own stuff. Um, do that. But I think what is important too when practicing, and this is always a hard question, is people are like, well, how do I practice or whatever? I can tell you the way that I practiced isn't necessarily like oh, I just did like a small little exercise that took 20 minutes and I just keep doing that over and over and over again. I practice by making characters. That's kind of like my methodology and approach to it is, um, say I want to learn how to do hair, for example. I will either sit down, make a hairstyle, be like, I want to practice this hairstyle. I'll sit down and practice it, or I'll choose a character that incorporates that aspect very heavily. So then I'm required to learn while doing it in the process of like making um making something, So and I like that because at the end of the day, it's not like you're not practicing without a product, a final result, you know what I mean? So that is what I would recommend. But yeah, like I said, I like to sculpt every day. I this week I think I sculpted every day to some extent. And so it's just a good habit to kind of get into. And also once you start working like professionally, uh I think it's a really good habit to have, because the fact that you know, when you're working professionally, you're making someone else's vision, you're making someone else's product. And so it can be tiring because you're not necessarily making you might be making things that you like, but you're not necessarily making the things that you want to be making. So because of that, you might like get a little bit more tired, you know, a little bit more taxed from that. So I would recommend just always working on your own personal work, you know, for the sake of that. Okay, so I'll probably stream, I don't know, maybe I'll go for like another 15-20 minutes or whatever. Um so yeah. Uh Dragons are interesting topics. They're fun. How long does it take to complete one of these? So this I've probably been sculpting for like I've only been sculpting this guy on stream, and I've probably sculpted for maybe like 3 hours. This is probably like the third or fourth hour on it. So that's about how long it took to get to this point. For this guy, so this guy was kind of an interesting topic, and this is just kind of an equivalent example. I would say that this took me a lot longer, but that's just because I did all of this scaling by hand. So that, I mean, there's a lot of scales obviously, so that took more time than the actual rest of the sculpt did. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. That being said, I probably will do the same thing for this piece, but that's because there's not as many scales as there was on that last one. So and it was a fun exercise. It was a good exercise to kind of practice that, you know, sort of approach to things. So one interesting thing that I wanted to point out here is we kind of talked about like primary forms, secondary forms, and just refining. I think one way to help kind of visualize that is like if you look at the concept, you should be looking at like the big shapes. You see the big shapes when you first start, right? But as you start to iron out those big shapes, you start to notice smaller details. And so that, like right now, there is kind of this area on the lip that there's a line there that kind of makes it look like it, you know, recedes or drops in. So now that's something that I'm starting to focus on. That's something that I'm starting to see, but it's because I've established kind of that big form first, where it's like, okay, well, I have that big shape. Now let's see what else is in there. Oh, there's kind of like this change and transition of form in this area. So yeah. Uh, does base mesh really help? It depends. It depends what it is. I mean, yes, it helps, but it helps because it's kind of like a jumping off point. You're already like at a head start in the process if you use a base mesh. For something like this, there's not going to be a base mesh. There is only uh yeah, there's not going to be a base mesh. So, like with something like this, I have to start from scratch. I have to make everything from a sphere, and that's what I did for this. But if you're making like a human, it's easier to start with like a base mesh of a head than like starting from scratch every single time. So, it just saves you a little bit of time, saves you like having to measure proportions and things like that. So, yes, using a base mesh is really useful when you can. But I tend not to use them for personal work just because I think it's a good exercise to be able to make things from scratch, which it took me a long time to feel comfortable with that. You know, that is something that when I first started, I wanted to rely on a base mesh, and that was just because it was kind of a crutch. It was what I felt comfortable with because I knew that I was going to get something that looked pretty okay, you know. So, okay. Um I made a mistake. I meant how to export a sculpt from ZBrush into Maya for retopology. So I use the FBX exporter. So once I like decimate the model, I'll just use the exporter and bring it in that way. So I'll export it as an FBX and then just import it right into Maya. So uh practice by making more characters. That's actually a pretty good idea. Yeah, I mean, and you know, I know other people will practice different ways than that, but that's just how I find it best to practice things because at the end of the day, I'm going to get a final piece. So I know someone said the practice character doesn't necessarily have to be portfolio piece, right? It doesn't, but for me, I want to make things to show people. So I usually make things that I can ultimately show people. So all of the practices that I do, yes, they end up being portfolio pieces, but that's because I go into them knowing that I'm going to practice something and I want to take it to that level. You don't have to, but that's just kind of my own personal take. Like with this head, I haven't done a dinosaur in probably 10 years. I've been wanting to do one. I wanted to practice scales and creating flow and you know just kind of that overall process. It was something that I hadn't done in a while, wanted to practice at. So I picked a piece that was going to do it, but I knew at the end of it I was still going to have a portfolio piece. So he did say about a week. I did say about a week. What did I say about a week? Complete one of these. Yeah, it just depends. Depends the piece. Depends how long. You know, anywhere from for something like this took. If I was to add up all the time, this sculpt probably took maybe like 20 to 30 hours, maybe. I would have to look to double check that, but that's what I would guess. So, scale. What does he mean by scales? These scales. So all of these scales, sculpted all these by hand. So those are the scales I was talking about. Which I will do on this piece too, probably. I think he was talking about the dinosaur scales, like the texture. Yes, I was. When will you do more portfolio reviews? That is a good question. I like to think that I can do them once a month. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Last month it didn't really happen just because I was busy. This month I'm not sure when I will do it. I am gonna be. I have stuff going on throughout the month, so I'm not 100% sure. Um, I will hopefully do one this month though. So if you guys are interested in that, you know, for people who aren't familiar, I do portfolio reviews on my channel. So those I inform people like through my stories. So keep an eye out there. Follow me on Instagram if you guys want to keep an eye on that, and that's usually where I announce them and take submissions and things like that. So but yes, as to when the next one will be, I am not sure. Probably not for a couple of weeks at least. Maybe I can do one in like 2 weeks. I don't know. That would be nice, but I'm not going to hold myself to that because I don't know what 2 weeks from now holds. Okay, so this is feeling a little bit too kind of like pushed out. So I will say I feel like we made a lot of like refinement progress from this to this. So we're definitely heading in a good direction. I would say it's not too much longer before we probably can get to a point of like starting to move more into like tertiary forms. I do still have a lot of like cleanup to do, but we're getting there. So let's see. Yeah, I need a lot of work on this area. So this whole shape is like turned really wonky. I need to I don't should I do yeah, I'm just gonna sculpt it in. Probably not the best idea just because I had this same issue with the with this. But like this area I just sculpted in and you can see it's like all janky and wonky. Um, which, you know, see, I have issues in my work too, guys. But yeah, I probably shouldn't sculpt like the tear duct area in just because that's one area that's always hard to like retain and using the ZBrush, the Z remesh workflow, but oh well, I'd rather do that than have to deal with another mesh. let's lift this back eye ridge a little bit more. Want to create more of like a kind of sharper angle on this line. That feels a little bit better. Yeah. See, that subtle little change kind of adds to the more intimidating factor. I mean, let's be honest, turtles aren't the most intimidating things in the world, but anything we can do to kind of help that will be good. So this... Why by hand and not using alphas? Just because. No particular reason. It was mostly just to be an exercise. I think for me personally, going back to like the learning, like how to practice, that's part of why I do things by hand, is because I think it's, for me, I retain more by doing things the hard way than by just like taking the easy route. And it may not necessarily be the best solution, but for me it just kind of is a better way to learn. So that's kind of why I do it. And then, you know, like say I'm in a production, they're like, hey, make this turtle monster thing, and I'm like, okay, cool, well, where are my alphas? And they're like, what alphas? You know, it makes it so that I don't have to rely on external resources if I don't have them. You know, it's a good way to like know how to do things without having to rely on additional material. So that's part of why I do it. And it's more fun that way. It definitely is more time consuming. I will say that I wouldn't recommend it if you're like of the mindset of like doing a lot of art quickly, which I would love to be, but I'm a little bit too neurotic and wanting things to look a certain way. So that is kind of why I end up doing it that way. So for my next project, like this project, maybe I'll use some alphas. I don't know, just since I did with the last one, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how I feel. Yeah, see, all this topology in here is getting kind of hard to manage. It's getting wobbly and crinkly. And this is one of the reasons why you would want to get some like decent topology in here, but we're not going to do that. Okay, so we're probably going to sculpt for like another 10 minutes or so. So if you have any last questions, make sure to get them in the chat. So the decimator reduces the number of polygons so you can easily retopologize in ZBrush and Maya. Yes. So here, I'll just show a quick example. This has 600,000. We'll just duplicate this real quick. If I come up to Decimation Master, pre-process current, it'll run the operation. You'll see it's processing up here. Since this is only 600,000, it should be pretty quick, which it is. And then you can modulate the percentage, which it does a really good job of retaining what you sculpted. So if I was to drop this down to like 5% and hit decimate current, you know, there's definitely some faceting in there, but now you have a model that essentially retains the same forms that you had from here. Like this is the original one, this is the decimated one. You can easily topologize on that. So yeah. So let's delete that. And yeah, like I said, that's my approach in my workflow. Yeah, look at that. We're making progress. We're making strides in the right direction, guys. So these are the streams. First stream, second stream, third stream, this stream. So we're getting there. We're getting something cool. Kinda. I don't know. Okay, so I don't really want to work on the eye area. I need to get like cleaner topology in that area. This lip with the like beak area, I need to redo that because I think that this needs to be recessed and then this needs to be over the top of it. At least that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. These teeth look horrible, which I still don't know how I'm going to approach those. So that'll come, but and for this, we might just do the other brush. So let's see. I think we're going to separate like right up here. So this is going to be the top part of the beak. And then we'll do kind of this part into the beak as well, maybe. Let me see. No, maybe I'll do, because this feels like it's like organic, so we'll come up here and do this instead. So then this will kind of flow over the top of it, and I'm guessing that maybe that's just kind of like some shading. So we'll make this a little bit more interesting. And then this will have a lip because this is going to be the raised area. That's going to be over the top of this. Okay. That's a little bit better, I think. I've been practicing on a bust for a week now. I want to know if I have to retopologize the head before working on the hair more. I would say, I mean, it depends, I guess. It's kind of a case by case basis on like what the final result is. For heads, I will say that I usually always end up with what's it called? I always end up with like a topology at the end. Usually like for personal work, that is the one thing that I always will like have a clean topology on for the most part. Just because I think that like you want more like clean like flow of lines and like things like the eyes, like there's a lot to focus on this character. The eyes are important, but like they're not as pivotal as they are on like a human character. So yeah, I would say for once you have your primary forms in and your secondary forms in for your head for a person, I would do a retopology on it. And there are quick solutions. You can like find base meshes like in ZBrush if you really wanted to use them. You could just get a quick base mesh and you could use something like ZWrap. I think that's what it's called, 3D wrap, whatever it's called. And you can just rewrap that to the model. And that's what I would recommend doing. You don't necessarily have to do your own topology, but you could just wrap it to your model. So let's see, what's something cool you recently learned in ZBrush or just in general? Let's see, something I learned recently. That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure. In ZBrush, I don't know if there's anything I learned recently that I can think of. In general, I've just been working on some learning things like hair and drawing and more marvelous designer stuff. So I guess that's interesting. Maybe, I don't know. Um, let's see. Yeah, I would say that, I guess. But I don't really have much to show for it right now. But hopefully in the future I will. Marvelous Designer is so complicated though. It is. It's you know, I know that I had mentioned earlier about like doing things the hard way. And I do the same thing when it comes to cloth. I like to sculpt my cloth by hand. And most of that comes down to one, I think it's just faster for me because it's easier to just start from a sphere, sculpt out the forms, and then I can just sculpt the wrinkles myself so I can put them where I want them. But yeah, it is complicated. It's hard to learn or hard to get a good result, and so for me, that's I'm trying to improve on that. But yeah, I just want to do them by hand. It's much more enjoyable. Okay. I will say there was a question a little while ago asking about practicing and stuff like that. I guess I kind of thought of something else that was I could touch on with that. I know that I'd mentioned like, oh, once you should start and you should do like 30 minutes or whatever. I will say I just want to reiterate it. If you do try and practice, don't like try and overdo it. I think that that's kind of an easy way to like over push yourself. And I remember when I first started, I was like really pressured by the idea of like sitting down and sculpting for 8 hours, and it seemed like such a daunting thing. So, taking the time to kind of build up to that, I think is really, really helpful. So, guess I'll just leave that as part of the conversation as well. This eye duct feels a little too low, so we're going to lift this up. Okay, cool. Hey, how's it going, Tattoon? I'm doing good, thank you. I actually find it okay. It's great for making a base model for the clothes. It is. It is good. I think for me, I have a harder time getting a result that I'm happy with than just if I was just to do it, in ZBrush, just like start sculpting on it. But I'm trying to change that. So I want to be able to, expand that skill set a little bit more. So hopefully I can start doing that. Okay, cool. I think we're gonna probably call it here. So we can see we made good progress between the two of them. A lot more refinement, structures getting a lot better. So hopefully in the next one we can, kind of tighten up all these secondary forms and start moving into more of the tertiary forms and things like that. So, let's see. Apologies if this deviates from the main topic, but why are people primarily favoring Substance Painter over Mari nowadays? Painter is just really easy to use. Painter's not very complicated. It's pretty user friendly in terms of like how it works. Mari is a lot more complicated. At least it was when I used it. I used it in like 2016, somewhere around there, and it was a lot more of a chore to get things. I know that it's improved since then, so I can't really speak to it now, but for games it's gives us a great result quickly. So that's kind of the main reason I think why it's used in games. Mari is great for film because of the fact that like you have so much resolution and information that you can throw at it, whereas Painter can get slowed down a little bit more. So that's primarily why. But Painter's really fun. I love using Painter. Painter is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. Mari was cool, but it definitely was intense to learn. So that's part of why I never stuck with it. I liked the user friendliness of Substance Painter. So, but with that said, thank you everyone. We had a good stream today. We went for, I don't know how long I've been going for. like maybe 2 hours or something, which is good. This is probably one of the longer streams that I've had in a while. So thank you guys for coming by. Hopefully I was able to answer everyone's questions and give some information. If you guys are interested, check out my Instagram. Also check out the YouTube channel. If you just search Jared Chavez, I have a lot of stuff over there for sculpting, texturing, things like that. I do portfolio reviews. I know I'd mentioned that on the stream, so keep an eye out for that. I do plan on doing one this month, so if you're interested in that, make sure to follow the Instagram, because that's where I'll post about it. But yeah, thank you guys again. You guys were a great audience today. A lot of fun talking, a lot of great questions, and yeah, it was cool chatting. So I will see you guys